Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're going to explore some pretty interesting excerpts you shared from the book. How do we know ourselves?
Yeah.
It dives into the fascinating world of self-perception and the surprising ways our minds work.
Yeah.
Get ready to uncover those hidden influences that shape your everyday decisions.
Really cool stuff. These excerpts highlight some really intriguing psychological concepts.
Yeah.
We'll be exploring, implicit egotism, those unconscious biases that make us favor things connected to ourselves,
Right.
and how our attention, or lack of it, can impact our experience of the world.
Okay, so let's start with this implicit egotism idea.
Yeah.
So the book describes it as this subtle, unconscious tendency to gravitate towards things that remind us of ourselves. Have you ever noticed how you might feel a bit more drawn to people who resemble you physically?
It's not just about vanity. Think about it.
Yeah.
We're most familiar with our own faces. So seeing similar features in others could trigger a sense of familiarity, leading to a slightly more positive feeling. It's like our brains are saying, hey, this person feels a bit like me.
That makes sense. But the book goes beyond just physical resemblance. It talks about something called the name letter effect, where people might unconsciously favor letters in their own name.
Wow.
This could even influence things like choosing a spouse or even where you decide to live.
This name letter effect really makes you think about how even seemingly insignificant things like our names can have a subconscious impact on our choices. Some psychologists believe this stems from a basic need for self-affirmation. By gravitating towards things that resemble our names, we might be unconsciously reinforcing our own identity. It's like a subtle whisper from our subconscious, guiding our decisions in unexpected ways.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. It makes you wonder what other hidden forces are at play in our daily lives.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The book also dives into a phenomenon called surname-occupation matching. It suggests that, statistically, people are more likely to end up in professions that sound similar to their last names.
The book highlights this fascinating trend, using data going as far back as the 1940 U.S. Census.
Wow.
They found some pretty compelling correlations. While some might dismiss this as mere coincidence, the data suggests a deeper connection between our names and our career choices. It's another example of those subtle nudges from our subconscious shaping our paths in ways we might not fully realize.
Okay, so we've been talking about how our minds might unconsciously gravitate towards things that resonate with our sense of self. Now let's shift our focus to another fascinating way our minds shape our reality: attention.
Okay.
So our attention is like a spotlight, right?
Right.
It illuminates certain aspects of our experience while leaving others in darkness. The book uses the term selective attention to describe this process, emphasizing how our brains constantly filter information to prevent us from being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And this filtering process isn't always perfect, right? The book talks about inattentional blindness, where we can miss things right in front of us because our attention is focused elsewhere. Like that classic experiment where people miss the gorilla walking through the basketball game because they're so focused on counting passes.
It's a powerful demonstration of how we can be blind to the unexpected when our attention is preoccupied. Think about it. You're driving down a busy street, completely focused on the traffic ahead. It's entirely possible that you might miss something happening in your peripheral vision. Our brains have to prioritize certain information over others, and sometimes that means crucial details slip through the cracks.
I've definitely had moments like that where I'm so engrossed in a conversation or a thought that I completely miss something happening around me. It's a bit unsettling to realize how much we might be missing out on simply because our attention is directed elsewhere. And the book points out that this inattentional blindness isn't just limited to vision.
Exactly. The research shows that we can experience inattentional deafness as well, where we fail to hear sounds because our attention is preoccupied. There's even evidence for inattentional numbness for touch. So it's not just what we see, but what we hear and feel that can be influenced by our attention, or lack thereof.
Now that we've uncovered these potential blind spots in our perception, let's explore another fascinating way our minds try to make sense of the world: through misheard lyrics.
Oh, I love this.
Right. Yes, you're talking about mondegreens.
Yeah.
Those moments when we mishear a song lyric and create a completely new, often hilarious meaning. It might seem trivial, but these misinterpretations offer a unique window into how our brains process language.
Right.
The author of the book actually shares a personal anecdote about mishearing a line as "and Lady Mondegreen" instead of "and laid him on the green." It perfectly illustrates how our brains strive to find meaning even in ambiguous sounds.
What's fascinating here is that these mishearings aren't random.
Right.
Our brains actively try to predict what we're going to hear based on context, prior experience, and even our current mood. If the sounds are ambiguous, our brains might fill in the gaps with something that makes sense to us, even if that's not the intended message.
So it's not just about passively receiving information.
Right.
Our brains are actively shaping how we perceive the world around us, constructing meaning even where none exists.
Right.
It makes you wonder, what other truths in our lives might be shaped by these hidden mental processes?
That's a question worth pondering. Perhaps we should delve deeper into the book's discussion on habits next. They offer some intriguing insights into how we can transform difficult behaviors into effortless routines.
Let's dive into that. So the book dives into habits and how they can actually help us navigate, the complexities of life.
That's right.
Mm.
It's fascinating how habits, once established, can free up our mental energy for other tasks.
They mentioned a study that found it took an average of 66 days for participants to form a new habit, though of course this can vary depending on the person and the complexity of the habit itself.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all time frame, but what's intriguing is how the author describes their own life as being structured around routines and habits, even wearing the same style of pants for years.
They even shared a funny anecdote about a disagreement with their spouse over who picks up the laundry more often.
Oh, really?
It seems even small, everyday tasks can become sources of contention when habits clash.
This highlights an important psychological concept called ego depletion. The idea is that willpower is a limited resource, and every decision we make depletes it. Habits, on the other hand, require minimal conscious effort, freeing up our mental bandwidth for more important matters.
So by establishing helpful habits, we can essentially streamline our decision-making processes and conserve our mental energy.
Precisely. It's like having autopilot for everyday tasks. The book even mentions former President Obama's strategy of wearing only gray or blue suits to minimize decision fatigue, if you think about it. Quite a brilliant approach to managing a demanding schedule.
That's taking habit formation to a presidential level. But it makes sense by eliminating those small, everyday decisions, you free up your mind to focus on the bigger picture.
Speaking of seeing the bigger picture, the book also explores how our expectations can actually influence the behavior of others.
Okay.
They call this behavioral confirmation.
It sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. They discussed a study where male students were shown photos of women. They were about to have a phone conversation with each other. The men were led to believe that some of the women were very attractive while others were not, even though the photos weren't accurate representations.
And what happened? Did the men's beliefs actually affect how the women behaved?
The results were fascinating. The men who believed they were talking to an attractive woman acted more friendly and engaged during the conversation.
So as a result, the women on the other end of the phone responded in a more warm and engaging manner, confirming the men's initial expectations.
It's a powerful example of how our beliefs can create a feedback loop, shaping our interactions and relationships.
It makes you wonder how often we unknowingly create self-fulfilling prophecies in our own lives, both positive and negative.
Absolutely. Imagine approaching someone with the belief that they're untrustworthy. You might act defensively or suspiciously towards them, which could lead them to behave in a way that confirms your initial belief.
Right. On the other hand, if you approach someone with warmth and openness, you're more likely to elicit a positive response, creating a virtuous cycle.
It highlights the profound impact our expectations can have on others, often without us even realizing it.
So what can we do with this knowledge? Should we just try to think positive thoughts all the time?
It's not necessarily about forcing positivity, but rather being mindful of the expectations we bring to our interactions. Are we projecting our own insecurities or biases onto others? Are we giving people the benefit of the doubt and allowing them the space to be their best selves?
It's a powerful reminder to examine our own beliefs and how they might be influencing our relationships.
Speaking of beliefs, the book also delves into a concept that's closely related to behavioral confirmation: the self-serving bias.
What is self-serving bias exactly?
It's this tendency we have to take credit for our successes while blaming external factors for our failures.
It's like wanting to take all the glory when things go well, but shifting the blame when they don't.
Exactly. It's a classic human defense mechanism. We all want to see ourselves in a positive light.
The book presents some interesting research on how this bias can manifest in different areas of our lives.
For instance, studies have shown that athletes are more likely to attribute their victories to their skill and effort.
But when they lose, they often point to bad luck, unfair officiating, or the opponent's exceptional performance.
It's a similar pattern in the workplace.
You see managers taking credit for a successful quarter, attributing it to their leadership.
But if the company experiences losses, they might blame external factors like a weak economy or increased competition.
It seems this bias can creep into all aspects of life, even our personal relationships.
Indeed, when things are going well in a relationship, we might take credit for our contributions.
But when conflicts arise, we might blame our partner's shortcomings or difficult circumstances.
It's a natural human tendency to protect our ego and maintain a positive self-image.
But as the book points out, this self-serving bias can have some negative consequences as well.
You're right, it can prevent us from learning from our mistakes if we're always finding external reasons for our failures.
And it can also create tension in our relationships if we're not willing to take responsibility for our actions.
It can even hinder our personal growth as we become blind to our own areas for improvement.
So how do we overcome this self-serving bias? Is it even possible?
It starts with awareness.
Mhm.
Recognizing that we all have this tendency is the first step.
The book suggests that cultivating humility can be a powerful antidote.
Humility allows us to acknowledge our own limitations and recognize that we don't have all the answers.
It opens us up to learning from others and recognizing the value of diverse perspectives.
And it fosters a sense of interconnectedness, reminding us that we're all part of a larger web of humanity.
It sounds like humility can help us to be more honest with ourselves and others.
Exactly. It's about letting go of the need to be right all the time and embracing a posture of curiosity and open-mindedness.
This deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about. I'm starting to see how these subtle biases and mental shortcuts can shape our perception of the world in profound ways,
It's a reminder that we're not always as rational or objective as we like to believe.
and that there's always more to learn about ourselves and the human mind.
Absolutely. These excerpts have just scratched the surface of a vast and fascinating field of study. Perhaps we should explore some of the other topics the book touches on, like the impact of our physical actions on our emotions.
Okay.
They discuss this intriguing idea called the facial feedback effect.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about this facial feedback effect. So you were saying the book dives into this facial feedback effect.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept that suggests our facial expressions can actually influence our emotions.
So it's not just that our emotions cause us to, smile or frown, but the act of smiling or frowning can actually make us feel happier or sadder.
Precisely. They describe a study where participants were asked to hold a pencil in their mouths, either in a way that mimicked a smile or a frown.
Okay.
And simply holding the pencil in a smile-like position was enough to make people feel happier.
That's so interesting.
It's a remarkable example of how our physical actions can send feedback to our brains, influencing our emotional state.
It's like faking it till you make it. Our bodies can actually trick our minds into feeling certain emotions.
In a way, yes, it highlights the powerful mind-body connection and how it's a two-way street.
So if we want to feel happier, we should just try smiling more often.
It's not quite that simple, but there's definitely some truth to the idea that our physical expressions can influence our mood.
The book also mentions that this principle can be applied to cultivating empathy.
That's right. By consciously mimicking the facial expressions and body language of others, we can begin to experience their emotions more vividly.
It's like stepping into their shoes by literally mirroring their physicality.
And this phenomenon isn't limited to deliberate imitation. We also see it in something called emotional contagion.
Emotional contagion, what is that?
It's the tendency to unconsciously absorb the emotions of those around us.
Like when you're in a room full of happy people and you can't help but feel your own mood lift.
Exactly. Or, conversely, feeling a sense of unease or sadness when surrounded by people who are down or anxious.
It's almost like our emotions are contagious, spreading from person to person.
It's a fascinating example of how interconnected we are as human beings. Our emotions can influence those around us, and vice versa.
So it's important to be mindful of the emotional energy we bring to our interactions.
Absolutely. We can choose to be sources of positivity and support for others, or we can inadvertently contribute to a negative emotional atmosphere.
It's a reminder that our actions and emotions have a ripple effect, influencing those around us in ways we may not fully realize.
This brings us to another important point the book raises, the idea of moral myopia.
Moral myopia, that sounds intriguing. What does it mean?
It refers to a tendency to overlook our own ethical shortcomings while readily condemning the faults of others.
So it's a form of hypocrisy, seeing the speck in our neighbor's eye while ignoring the log in our own.
Precisely. The book provides some thought-provoking examples to illustrate this concept.
Okay.
They talk about how people might readily condemn historical atrocities like slavery,
Right.
but then fail to acknowledge their own complicity in present-day systems of oppression or exploitation,
Or how someone might express outrage over environmental destruction.
while continuing to engage in unsustainable consumption habits themselves.
It's a sobering reminder that true morality requires self-awareness and a willingness to hold ourselves accountable to the same standards we apply to others.
It's easy to judge others from a position of perceived moral superiority.
But the book challenges us to examine our own behavior and beliefs with the same critical lens.
It's a call for humility and a recognition that our own moral compass is constantly evolving.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexities of human perception and the subtle ways our minds can distort reality.
It's been a fascinating exploration of those hidden influences that shape our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
I'm leaving this conversation with a renewed appreciation for the importance of self-awareness, humility, and a willingness to challenge my own assumptions.
And a sense of wonder at the incredible capacity of the human mind to both deceive and enlighten us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of self-perception. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and food for thought.
Remember, the journey of self-discovery is ongoing. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring the depths of your own mind.